All right, fine. So yesterday we covered goals 1 to 9, looking at what the goals cover, potential business actions, the interaction of the goals with each other, and looking also at some case studies. I'm going to try and do the rest within 2 hours. And so what I'm going to do is skip some of the videos, which you can watch in your own time afterwards. So I won't show all of them. That should hopefully save us some time. Today, I'm going to go through the rest of the goals, goal 10 to 17. And then we'll talk a little bit about alignment of your work with the SDGs, about mainstreaming. And then I'll share information about UNDP tools and resources that you can use and that you can access as you mainstream the SDGs in your work. Okay, so goal 10 covers, so this is the goal on inequality, reducing inequalities. So when we think about the drivers of inequality, things like income, wages, social protection as well, those are the sort of the targets and indicators that sit within goal number 10. It looks as well at the regulation of financial markets. There's a lot that happens in the financial markets that prejudices people. And so there are indicators around that as well. It looks as well at discrimination, at the laws and policies. Again, I don't know whether she's online yet. I can't see the list now of participants, but it also looks at the laws and policies around discrimination and how we can work towards a more equal and a more just society. Issues of migration as well. We spoke about labor mobility yesterday. Issues of remittances as well, which is quite key in our context, given the size of our diaspora and even the size of remittances that comes into this country. Year on year, every single year, the volume of our remittances is actually larger than overseas development assistance that we get in this country. So there's been a debate about, how can we use them for productive purposes? How can we use them for economic development? But of course, there are a lot of issues that go into that, starting, of course, with the main issue of trust. Are people confident that, confident to allow their money or their funds and funding to be put into other things? The reduction of tariffs as well for developing countries, that's covered under goal number 10. And then voting rights, when we look at our international organizations and some of these treaties and global agreements, sometimes voting rights prejudice certain regions of the world. Apologies, colleagues, I just need to attend to something, just 1 minute. Very sorry about this. Okay, I'm sorry about that. And then, so why SDGs or SDG 10 matters for business? Okay, so when we look at issues of discrimination, it just reduces the diversity of the skills that you can get within your organization. But also when we start to bring in issues of migration as well and the mobility of people, it just means that you have a more diverse pool. You have a wider pool from which to choose from as you're doing your recruitment. There are reputational issues, of course, we spoke about this yesterday with regard to discrimination. Low incomes have an impact on poverty. We spoke about this yesterday, and then whether people can then be able to access and afford your products and your services. Strong regulation of the financial sector means that there's security for your financial assets as a business. You want to know that the financial sector is sound. You want to know that the operations are above board, because if they are not, and if anything happens, you also stand to lose and you can be affected by that as well. Tariffs have an impact on trading activity. We spoke about this as well, the AfCFTA. Voting rights just mean that every region of the world can be fairly represented around the table in some of these discussions. And then remittances, if you can imagine, if there were no remittances coming into the country, a lot of people just wouldn't be able to survive. They wouldn't be able to spend. And a lot of these remittances are spent on goods and services that you as businesses provide. Interaction of goal 10 with others, fair incomes. They also help towards poverty reduction. We spoke about sort of the minimum wage yesterday and, just fair pay that contributes to poverty reduction. Food security deficits usually, that relationship between food security and quality, the poor usually suffer the most in terms of food security. Energy deficits are linked to income as well, and there's inequality along those lines as well, even when we look at the electrification rates in the country. We see that some don't have access, and that affects incomes, it affects livelihoods, it affects the way people live. Employment as well as a tool to address inequality from the income and the wages that people earn. The poor are more likely to engage in crime for survival, again, with inequality. And when we look at what's happening, I mean, the other reason why inequality is so important to address, I mean, it has tended to be a very, very stubborn sort of a development issue globally for a number of countries. And when we look next door to South Africa at just some of the violence, the crime, and that sort of thing, it really is just a symptom of the inequality that is in that country. And when we look at the statistics, 50% of South Africa's wealth is in the hands of just what 10% of the people, of the population. In Zimbabwe, it's a bit lower. Well, it's lower, it's 25%, but still, those are not good figures. They're not good statistics, and they lead to all sorts of problems, with crime just being one. Partnerships, goal 17. But also wash deficits, those who are poorer or less income, again, they are less able to access water, sanitation, and hygiene facilities, able to afford. Inequality as well with regard to education. There is such a huge gap when we think about just the quality of education, the sort of schools we have in the country. So for instance, if we go back to the COVID era and, the lockdown and people couldn't move around, children couldn't go to school, but you found that it wasn't very many in terms of percentage-wise of the schools who were able to continue. Only a small percentage of the country's schools were able to continue using online learning and digital tools, but many children were not able to do that. And as a result, they were left behind in that regard. There were a lot of gaps in terms of some being left behind and some not being able to continue. Again, the inequality there was quite obvious and significant as well. Women more likely to face discrimination, so inequality with regards to gender, the growth of urban slums due to income deficits. We spoke about this yesterday, urbanization, rural to urban migration, and people just seeking those better economic prospects, or more likely to have to rely on natural resources for their survival. The same with water resources as well. And then, of course, fair wages in industry. We hear people complaining sometimes, and sometimes there's the labor bodies call for action around that, protests and this sort of thing. And then, of course, inequalities and resilience. So climate change, it's the poor often who feel it the most, who bear the burden of it, who are less able to bounce back, let's say after a drought or after a flood or after any other sort of extreme weather event. And then deficits in health access and health provision. We spoke about this yesterday. Some are able to afford, some are not able to afford. So, I mean, just in terms of equality, there is no equality. And there are a lot of people who are maybe dying and who are suffering from health issues that they don't need to be suffering from, but just because they cannot afford and they cannot access the services that they need. So in terms of examples of actions, when we look at the targets to do with income, and with income, minimum wages and that sort of things, job creation. And I know, as a business, most times you just want to keep costs low. What is the lowest cost? What is the lowest level of costs that we can, where we can peg ourselves so we can still survive? But job creation is also one way. As you employ people, as people earn an income, it helps to address issues of poverty and therefore issues of inequality. Employment we spoke about in local areas as well, inclusion of locals in supply chains. So I hope as I'm going through, you're seeing the interlinkages. We spoke about the interconnectedness of the goals and of the SDGs. So as we go through the goals, you begin to see that what you saw under one goal, you see under another. And like I was saying, sometimes with that one action, you can cut across a number of SDGs. And then of course, any other poverty reduction area that is relevant, activity that is relevant within your context. Discrimination, sorry, that's supposed to be in discrimination, okay, on any grounds. So just ensuring that within your workplace, within your business, there is no discrimination, whether it's on the grounds of gender, on the grounds of age. Some people don't want to employ young people, they think young people are a problem. We hear all this talk about AMA 2000 and, oh, they're different, we don't understand them, but again, that can be grounds for discrimination if we don't sort of think through these things. Glass ceilings, we hear about glass ceilings in businesses and organizations. And then, of course, maybe another thing that you can do is just think about sort of downsizing. And we spoke about this, your packaging, ensuring that there's products and services for low-income consumers as well. Regulation and monitoring of the financial markets, of course, advocacy for greater financial sector regulation, working together with the Reserve Bank. There's a deposit protection scheme now. So there's a number of things that government has done in this regard. But even as businesses, even just lending your voice to this conversation does make a difference, because sometimes we do see communities, we see CSO, we see businesses advocating for change, advocating for certain policies, and that happens. Migration, mobility of people. So facilitation of migration of experts across borders, particularly for those of you who have operations in more than one country. I've seen some companies where it's very open. Their staff move from country to country, just helping people to move in that way, so that you as well as a business can also then benefit from skills and experts that are coming from different countries. And of course, giving our people exposure to different contexts. And of course, as well, lending your voice to migration policy, as well in conversation and in collaboration with government. The issue of tariffs, we spoke about, engaging in the structures, lending your voice to that. Okay. Did we go through goal 10 yesterday? Why do I feel like I'm repeating this? But anyway, so for those of you who provide maybe money transfer services, I know it used to be the Western Unions and people like them, but more and more the banks are doing it as well. What are your costs? What do they look like? There's a specific indicator actually that looks at the cost of transferring money. So sometimes it's really quite difficult to justify the costs that we are charged for a number of things, in our local economy, in our local context, but just playing your role by minimizing that. Yes, you want to make some money out of it. That is true, but also facilitating the movement of money in that way. And then also maybe thinking about providing money transfer services that can make sense for even the poorer people. So just the other day, actually, someone was telling a story about how they have a friend who lives overseas, and this person wanted to send money from Chipinge to, I forget where it was, but somewhere else in the country, in the same province. And so first of all, it was over $1,000. And so first of all, there was a limit in terms of how much they could send. So I think when it came to it, they had to split the money into, was it 4 or 5 transactions, because there was a limit on the maximum amount that you can send. But not only that, it also costs $23 per transaction, which meant that they would have had to spend over $100 to transfer. I think it was $1,500 or something like that. They then decided to, okay, look, in fact, this person who wanted to send the money lives in the UK. They then thought, okay, fine, let me see how much it will cost if I just transfer the money from my account in the UK to this person. And it turned out to be £8, and £8 at the moment is, I don't think it's even more than $10. So how do we justify some of these costs, and what do we need to be doing to help to bring them down so that these services are affordable to everyone, so that there's no inequality, but at least we reduce inequality on the basis of income, on the basis of how much money people have. This is Airbnb, what they are doing around in the area of SDG number 10. Maybe I can speak about it briefly instead of showing the video. Maybe let me just play the first few minutes of the first part of the video. Maybe that's better. Okay, so I won't play the whole video, just the first part, just to give you an idea of what they're talking about, and then in your own time you can watch the whole thing.
Airbnb is outlining ambitious plans to use its platform to help refugees and evacuees around the globe on its new Open Homes platform. The goal, to find housing for 100,000 displaced people in the next 5 years. Earlier, we spoke with Susan Wynn Bailey, an Airbnb host from Denver, who's hosted several refugee families over the last few months. She explained why she decided to sign up for this program.
When I first was contacted by Airbnb asking if we could host a refugee in need, it was just an unequivocal yes. It's consistent with our values as a family, and quite honestly, it aligns with, I think, the broader vision and mission of Airbnb, which is to serve those in need.
And we spoke with Airbnb co-founder Joe Gebbia, who made new announcements about this platform from Paris and how the company is trying to get more people like Susan signed up for the program.
Well, you can imagine over the last 5 years, we've seen incredible growth of our host community. And it really begged this question: what if we became proactive about situations in the world rather than just reactive to natural disasters? So pretty quickly, the topic of displaced people came front and center to us. Currently, there's 65 million displaced people. That's the most since World War II. It also happens to be close to the population of the United Kingdom. So as we looked at what is Airbnb really good at, short-term hospitality, engendering trust between strangers, and global presence, we thought we might extend this natural generosity into a platform that we're calling Open Homes.
You call this 21st century philanthropy. Why are you doing this?
Okay, so I mean, I think you get the idea in terms of using what they have, using their business model to contribute to some of these development issues. The issue of refugees, migration, and those sorts of issues sit within goal number 10. And of course, they're driven by poverty, driven by inequalities. And this is how Airbnb mobilized their stakeholders to be part of the solution, at least to do what they can with what they have. All right. Any questions on goal 10 before I move on?
No questions.
Okay, I see someone's put their hand, raised their hand. Maybe you can go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Ethel. It's not a question as such. It's just a comment on how we are addressing this goal number 10. In my view, the inequalities, they all emanate from one major inequality, which is that of income from a global perspective. So I think we can try to address those small incomes, but as long as we don't address how we come in economically into the global economy, we'll talk for years and years, and these inequalities will continue. So I think in trying to address this aspect of inequalities, the most important thing is to look at the economic inequalities and how we can, as a third world country, address such issues.
Definitely. I mean, I couldn't agree more, and thanks for that. I mean, as you're saying, yes, at the lower level, on the ground, it's these small things, small changes, but more than that, we also need sort of at the national level to start to address inequality in that way. And when we think about, when you're talking about our role in the global economy, when we think about just the opportunities that are coming out of the AfCFTA and other sort of trade agreements, that's one other way that we can do that in terms of growing that. I mean, Africa, and this is not just a Zimbabwe problem, really, because Africa, I think the statistic is something like it's only 1%, 1.5% of Africa's trade, total trade, is intra-Africa trade. The rest we do with countries that are outside of our own continent. And so it's a whole conversation that needs to sort of happen. It's action, more importantly, that needs to happen, not only at national level, but even at the level of, at the Africa level, in terms of how we move and how we use, whether it's our natural resources, whether it's our human resources. You know, as the most populous country in the world, how we maybe take advantage of the youth bulge. 75% of our population is young people. How do we take advantage of that to position ourselves economically to grow, so that at that higher level, at that bigger level, and maybe at that more effective level, we can start to address issues of inequality. But yes, thanks for that. Anybody else before I move on? All right. Okay, so goal number 11 looks at our cities, sustainable cities and communities. How do we make them more inclusive? How do we make them safer? How do we make them more resilient, whether it's to disasters or economic shocks or even health shocks? how do we make them more sustainable? Okay, so issues within goal 11, access to housing and to basic services, issues of waste collection. I mean, how many of us, I mean, when you think about just how many times your rubbish has been collected by the city of Harare over the past month, you know, some of these things we see that more needs to be done, things are not working the way they're supposed to. When we look at the aesthetics of our city, whether it's the roads and potholes, whether it's our parks and green spaces, what are they looking like? Yesterday, we were talking about informal settlements. More and more of them are coming up in urban areas, and all of those issues are addressed under goal number 11. Safe and affordable transport. Are people able to get to where they want to get to? You know, when we look around in our context, there's a lot of mshika-shika, there's a lot of bad driving by these public transport providers. What do we need to be doing about that? Land use as well. I mean, at the moment, I'm not sure that, you know, the land use laws are being followed necessarily. You see all sorts of things being built and coming up where they shouldn't be. When we think about even just construction on wetlands and that sort of thing, I mean, there's a lot that is not working the way it should be, and all of these issues are under goal number 11. Yesterday, we had City Park on the call. I don't know whether they are here today, but this is, I guess this would be the main goal where you come in as well. Some of those issues that are happening within our cities and how we just maintain order. Issues of culture and heritage, funny enough, are sitting within goal number 11. I don't know how, but that's where they are. How do we preserve our culture and our heritage? How do we even make the economic case? How do we use our culture and heritage for economic gain? Green zones, public spaces, I've spoken about. Urban planning should be participatory as well. You know, citizens should be able to have a say, the businesses should be able to have a say, civil society should be able to have a say as well in urban planning, and those conversations around that and decisions that are made around that. And then disasters, you know, when you look, the issue of disasters has come up under a number of goals, and I don't know why or how it is, but I guess, yes, death and economic loss from these disasters as well. Why it matters for business. Bad urban planning can affect your business, not only the aesthetics as well, but also in terms of if you are needing land or if you're needing to run your business in a certain place, if the planning is bad, that can affect how you are able then to do your business, or even whether you can access that land to be able to do that. Slums, we spoke about this yesterday, higher risk for crime. They're also straining services. Under goal number 11, we have an opportunity to influence the planning, you know, in your local area. So get involved in those conversations, speak to the City of Harare, speak to the Ministry of Local Government. And, you know, it's important, and it's also quite useful for them to be able to get that feedback from on the ground. So if business can come in jointly with one voice to say, listen, this is what works for us. Maybe we propose that things can be done in this way. Public transport, can your staff get to work? Waste, we've spoken about, you know, collection of waste and collection of rubbish outside our homes, and of course the impact of natural disasters we spoke about yesterday. So those are all issues that, you know, that have a bearing on your business. Interaction with other goals. Urban slums are driven by poverty, and again, rural to urban migration. Urban agriculture, we spoke about this yesterday as well. I think it was under goal number 2. We're just seeing now that the rainy season is upon us. Everybody wants to use any open space to grow something, you know, and though some of those are supposed to be our open spaces, the green spaces, some of them are wetlands. You know, what needs to be done about this, and what can we do? What can you do as a business? Urban electrification, it's still not at 100% in Zimbabwe, and in our cities, this needs to happen. Economic loss due to disasters we've spoken about. Slums and inequality and poverty, the relationship there. Urban planning as well. Sometimes it's just the planning and how things are built, how they are not built, whether waste is collected, or whether the what are they called? The roadsides, whatever the edges, whether the grass is cut. I mean, just simple things like that as well can drive crime. I know near to where we are, near to where our office is, around the UZ area, sometimes the grass is not cut there, and it's quite a very high crime area in terms of smash and grab around some of the traffic lights there, because people will smash and grab, and then they just run into the bushes. The grass there provides refuge for them. So it's just things that the council can do, things that even businesses can do in your local area. And sometimes it's just simple things, really. It doesn't cost a lot of money. Taxation, are you paying your taxes? And licensing fees, urbanization, again, the strain on public services, including the provision of water. I mean, if you think about these, some of these illegal settlements and where are they using the bathroom, for instance, you know, where are they getting water? And of course, all of that then becomes a health hazard. Urban planning and skills around that, under goal number 4. Number 9, public transport, we've spoken about. Waste collection, we've spoken about. Recycling as well. Impact of disasters, health hazards from waste that is not collected, and so on. Possible business action, affordable housing, and more and more. And I think there's yesterday we're talking about the deficit in the provision of schools. Equally, there's a deficit in the provision of houses and homes. We don't have enough, and I don't know the statistic for this one, but we need many more houses, much more housing than we currently have. And this is a role for the construction sector, not only providing housing, but providing affordable housing. You know, we've seen some banks and others putting up, you know, affordable housing schemes, and there's room for more of this. There's need for more of this as a business. And your business could be in construction itself, or it could be in the provision of the materials for construction. But more and more as well, this idea of sustainable housing, of eco buildings and sustainable buildings as well, sustainable infrastructure as well, yeah. So access to public transport, provision of public transport services. I mean, there's a market opportunity in this, and I know there are restrictions in terms of who can fly these routes. And, you know, we have Zupco at the moment, but, and then we have Mshika, then we have the emergency taxis. But in that area, I think there's room for more order and just for more adherence to the rule of law. And yes, primarily it's the city, it's the city of Harare and the other city and local authorities who are responsible for this. But business can play a role, I think, in terms of some of that advocacy, in terms of conversations around what some of the other solutions can be in order to bring sanity really to public transport service provision. Transport infrastructure as well, about roads yesterday. On the issue of urbanization, urban planning, influencing planning decisions through a business lens. So thinking about what would work in terms of planning, what would work for businesses, what is not working for businesses at the moment, what else needs to be. And then, of course, you yourself as a business refraining from building on either, you know, on where you're not supposed to be building, or just adding haphazard extensions to your existing premises. You know, I think when we look at ourselves and what we are also doing in terms of being the offenders, there's a lot that we can do at that level as well. And then recreational facilities, we've seen some businesses coming up to regenerate and to reclaim disused facilities, disused green spaces, and sprucing them up again. And that, of course, contributes to goal number SDG 11. Safeguarding our culture and our heritage. There's a large business opportunity around this. And I know the Ministry of SMEs, Women's Affairs and SMEs, I mean, they are doing a lot around, you know, helping startups, helping SMEs to set up businesses in the area of culture and heritage assets. So there's a lot again there as well. The impact of disasters, I think I can skip this. We spoke about this a couple of times yesterday. The impact, your own impact on the environment. So waste collection services, we've seen the rise of private waste collection services, just realizing that, listen, the city of Harare is, you know, there's a strain, and other cities, of course, as well. There's a strain on their services. They're not collecting as often as they should be. So we've seen private waste collection services coming up, and they're earning money from that, while also making a contribution to target 11.6, energy efficient infrastructure as well, when we think about the impact of your services on the environment, influencing planning activity we've spoken about, retrofitting of businesses. So, you know, at the simplest level, at the cheapest level, is maybe just changing light bulbs to energy efficient ones, but there's more that can be done in terms of upgrading your buildings to make them more resource efficient, and of course, providing financing for green infrastructure. On this one, maybe I'll play the Hilton one because it's short. I think it's less than a minute, just over a minute. Okay, so that's what the Hilton is doing towards the global goals. But the one that I wanted to focus on was the one where they are reducing the amount of soap. I mean, Hilton hotels. So we have a lot. They have a lot of leftover little stubs and little pieces of soap, and reducing the amount that is being sent to landfill in support of SDG number 11. But there's also something that they're doing around volunteering. So even in your business, you can encourage volunteering. So, whether it's to pick up waste around your local area or whatever it is that contributes to sustainable development, but also that contributes to keeping your city sustainable, to keeping it looking good, and to ensuring that SDG number 11 can be a reality in your context and in the area that you work in. The other one is around housing, but you can watch that in your own time. Any questions before I move on to goal 12? Okay, so goal number 12 is about responsible production and consumption. It's about how we misuse or abuse resources, and it's ensuring this in a way that is sustainable, in a way that is not wasteful. And of course, as a business, in a way that even cuts costs. So so if you're in manufacturing, for instance, and your raw materials, so someone gave the example of, let's say, if you're manufacturing beverages, and to make 1 liter or to make 500 milliliters, the most efficient way to produce that is using 1 liter of water. But you find that some are using 2, some are using 5 liters of water. So which just means that your manufacturing process is not efficient, and you're wasting, for every unit, you're wasting 4 liters of water. So think about your production processes, your manufacturing processes, and how you can be more efficient. But it's also in thinking about what you can then do with the waste that comes out of, with the byproducts from your operations. What else can be done with them? Can you sell them to somebody else? Can you use them for something else? And then, of course, global food waste. And as much as we talk about the looming global food crisis and food shortages, there's also a lot of waste that is happening. Holiday Inn was here yesterday. I don't know if they are here now. What are you doing with your food waste? Where are you sending it? Are you just leaving it there for the city? I think you said you're from Mutare, for the city to come and collect when they do the rubbish collection. So what else can you be doing with that? You can think about what to do with it, what to do with leftovers. We see some people donating. I mean, if it hasn't been touched and it hasn't been used, we see some people donating to the less fortunate. We see others using it for more and more. We are seeing this, waste as a form of energy, biogas. So some people have some businesses have set up these biogas, I don't know what they call, biogas systems, where they can use their waste food to produce biogas, which they can then use for energy for their premises. Sustainability reporting is under goal number 12. I don't know how many of you are listed on the stock exchange and whether you are yet producing sustainability reports. Management of chemical waste as well, hazardous waste. That's under goal number 12. Sustainable business practices, just being efficient, just being sustainable, just thinking about tomorrow and thinking about how you can be responsible in that way. And then, of course, recycling as well. We've seen sort of the different colored bins where you separate your paper from the plastic, from other waste, from food waste, and then working with waste recyclers and people who can come and collect that and ensure that it doesn't go to the landfill, but can be reused and recycled. Okay, so why this matters, there's a business opportunity in the reduction of food wastes or food loss, especially at the production stage. When we think about post-harvest losses, so value addition there, it means that you earn more out of your produce than you would have if you had just sold it as it was, Or if you had not sold it and then it goes bad and then you can't get anything out of it. There are business opportunities as well in the treatment of hazardous waste. Under one of our projects, we're working with a young person who was going around collecting medical waste from hospitals, and then he would break it down and then recycle and then sell. There are people who also upcycle. They take whatever your waste is, they do stuff to it, they add stuff to it, they make it into something else, and it can be reused and recycled in that way. Recycling and efficiency, of course, there are cost savings from that. It means you're not spending as much on buying raw materials. It means you are saving on that, but it also means you can maybe even earn income from selling your waste to others who can use it. Sustainability reporting is increasingly becoming important. So for those who are listed, it's actually required on the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange. But even for investment decisions, we're seeing more and more investors starting to look at sustainability, starting to look at what you're doing around greening, starting to look at what you're doing even around the SDGs as well. And then there are some who said, listen, I will only invest if there is a demonstration of contribution to the Sustainable Development Goals. And then there's tourism in there under SDG number 12 as well. Sustainability and sustainable tourism. There are benefits from that, financial benefits, and then also there are penalties for the, for harmful fossil fuels in some parts of the world. And then of course, Emma as well will have something to say about that. All right, the interaction and fair distribution of resources. So on one hand, we're talking about, shortages, but on the other hand, we're talking about waste. How do we ensure that there's fair distribution of resources? Going back to that conversation about inequality, how do we ensure that there is enough for everybody, whether it's financial, whether it's food, whether there is enough for everybody in the world, and even at country level in most cases. It's just that the distribution is not being done in a way that is fair. It's not being done in a way where everybody gets something. Minimizing food waste, we've spoken about efficient use of energy. How can you make your buildings more efficient? Even your homes, how can you make them more efficient? And even we're talking about construction just now, and some of these toilets, the older ones, it's a huge tank, but you don't need that amount of water to flush, So we're seeing those water tanks, toilet systems becoming smaller just to increase efficiency with regards to water in the wash space. Employment through sustainable tourism, collaboration for SDG number 12, efficient use of water, I've just spoken about, training in the area of sustainable development, reducing waste that goes to landfills, we've spoken about. So that's the interaction between goal 11 and goal 12. More efficient use of natural resources, we've spoken a lot about this, the same with water. In our manufacturing processes in industry, and even as we innovate, how do we ensure that that is done in a way that ensures responsible and efficient use of resources? Climate change, we've spoken about. Health impacts, we've spoken about. Inequality, which is very similar to goal number 1. Okay, so in terms of possible business actions, adoption of resource-efficient production processes, but also lengthening product life cycles. I mean, this is something that can be done, and I guess there's a little bit of a debate in terms of, okay, we don't want to go the GMO route. We don't want to put too many preservatives in food, for instance. Let's say it's food. We don't want to put too many preservatives in there, the health impacts, but also people are wanting more and more natural foods, right? They're not wanting some of these chemicals and artificial inputs into food. But how can you lengthen the product life cycle so that people can keep it for longer? But also, how can you maybe downsize your packaging so that someone is not having to buy 2 kgs when they only want 200 grams? And by the time they finish, by the time they've used maybe 1 kg, the other kg has started going bad. And then they're forced to throw it away. And then it means that we're wasting. But also managing natural resources within your vicinity. A value addition I've spoken about when we are reducing food waste. This is a huge business opportunity. In this country, we are not doing enough in terms of value addition, whether it's food, whatever it is, our mineral resources, just our natural resources that we have, we are not adding enough value. There's a whole business opportunity around that. Partnerships between retailers and food processors. We've seen some partnerships where, so retailers will take, let's say, produce that is about to expire, and they know they're not going to be able to sell it before the expiry date. Then they have these arrangements with food processors where they then pass it on to processors who can do something with it. So for instance, fruits, right? Mango season is coming up. That's a good example. Mango season is coming up. So whether it's in the shops or whether it's the people who are selling in the markets, sometimes you get to a point where you see, listen, I'm not going to be able to sell everything that I have. But do you know that juice is made from overripe fruit? And sometimes that fruit that looks like, is it even still good? It's about to go bad. If we don't use it now, it's going to go bad. That is the best for processing, for beverages. So we've seen some of these partnerships where they then pass it on to them for cheaper than what they were selling it for. Donating excess produce, we've spoken about. Downsizing, I've just spoken about as well. Management of chemicals and waste, I spoke about the business where, collecting that waste, breaking it down and selling the components. So being careful about how you manage that, and just reducing as well the chemical waste that is generated as you look at your production processes and how that can be done better. Waste reduction, recycling. We spoke about the different colored bins. I don't know if ZNCC is now online. Lawyers, we know they do a lot of printing. They use a lot of paper. How can you reduce that? How can you reuse it? What can you do in terms of recycling? Sorting waste, we've spoken about. Partnership with upcyclers and recyclers. Sustainability reporting, as we said, it's become mandatory now, SDG reporting as well. But also, even if there's no requirement, let's say you're not listed, that doesn't mean that you're exempt. It doesn't mean that that's not applied to you. You can still do that reporting. You can still track your sustainability related activity and what it is that you are doing. And then awareness of sustainability, again, supplement and complement government activity around ensuring that people are aware of sustainability issues, they're aware of gender issues, human rights, peace, all the sort of things that sit within the SDGs. Research and development, putting some money towards that. It is very much worth investing in research and development. Then also sustainable tourism, being part of the conversation and contributing to the development of those strategies at a national level. Okay, so this one, I think I'll use the Unilever one because it's shorter, but I guess you could watch the other one in your own time.
A sustainable business is built on responsible production. Responsible production relies on resource efficiency and innovative thinking. Last year, 50% of our growth came from brands that help increase our positive impact. So we're supporting global goal number 12 to champion responsible production and consumption, because a sustainable world is everyone's business.
Okay, then I'm going to maybe show the first part of the Nike one because I found it to be quite interesting.
Channel. My name is Brinkley and I am a Nike Geekin, and today we're going to talk to a lot of cool guests about sustainability and innovation. Stay tuned for more. Hey guys, what is up? My name is Brinkley and I'm here at the Nike New York headquarters, and we have Shauna Hanna here, who is the VP of Sustainable Innovation at Nike. And oh my gosh, we're thrilled to have you.
Thank you.
Can you tell us about kind of Nike's commitment to sustainable innovation and really what that means?
Our goal is always to make athletes better and to make the world better for athletes. Nike's a big company and we have a big responsibility to be combating climate change at every chance that we have. And for innovation, that means us thinking about all the decisions that we make early in the process, all the way through to the end of the life of the product.
Awesome. So when we were chit-chatting a little bit earlier, you mentioned circularity design. Can you go into that a little bit more?
It really means thinking about the product end to end and all the lives that the product can have. Cool. So meaning at the very beginning of the process, the designers are really thinking about what materials are we choosing. Awesome. And let's choose recycled materials as often as we can. So that makes a little circular loop right there. Then as we
also think about design, and we're trying to design out waste at every chance that we can. So that means at the very beginning, can we use less material, or can we pattern our product in such a way that we eliminate the waste? And then we also want to think about when an athlete is finished with their product, we want them to give it back to us through reuse a shoe, because we will grind those shoes up and we'll turn it into a basketball court. See on the medal stand, jacket and pant, even the swooshes have grind in them.
No way.
So we're trying to use our products and give them multiple lives.
How cool is that? At Nike, we have.
Okay, so just on that issue of multiple lives and this issue that they're talking about circularity, you may have heard talk about circularity. It's becoming more and more topical. We hear more and more talk about it, but it's just this idea of ensuring that manufacturing, for instance, or products are produced in a way where they can be reused, they can be recycled, even multiple times. So like she's saying, you know, some of the material is already recycled, but also they think about, okay, what happens when someone is done with that shoe? What else can it be recycled into? So that, you know, it keeps going in a cycle and in a circle, use and reuse of materials. All right. Any question before we move on to number 13? I don't know why that says 8. Goal number 13.
No questions.
Okay, let's continue. Within goal number 13, remember I was saying yesterday that it's around the climate change policies, it's around the strategies and these international commitments. We have this conference of parties, the COP27 that's happening at the moment, where everybody globally comes together, where the world comes together to discuss climate change and related issues, and where countries make commitments about what they are going to do in their own spaces. So all the sort of things that they're discussing this week are all the sort of things that are included in goal number 13 and more, of course. So goal number 13 is around climate change mitigation and adaptation, including the resilience of people, the resilience of the economy, the resilience of our cities and towns, like we were discussing earlier, to the effects of climate change. Policies as well, the institutional capacities, are our institutions' capacity, do they have enough capacity to be able to manage these issues? And then, of course, disaster is coming up again under goal number 13. This one, I'm going to spend very little time on this slide because we've spoken multiple times about the impact of climate change and extreme weather events on your business, on infrastructure. And that it seems, you know, the incidence of these extreme weather events is rising, it's increasing. We're hearing about it far more often than we used to. And there are costs associated with that. And of course, the issue of carbon emissions as well. But the other thing as well is, you know, of course, opportunity to influence policy, like I've said, but more and more, because climate change is so topical and issues related to it. So whether it's carbon reduction of carbon emissions, renewable energy, all those sort of green and clean issues, because they're so topical at the moment. And because there's this global urgency to address these issues, we are seeing more and more climate finance and climate financing available. I don't know if the representative from FBC is on the call, because there's something called, so GEF is the Global Environment Facility and the GCF is the Global Green Climate Fund, right? And so that fund is for organizations that are doing something around climate change. And UNDP has a project that we're running under the GCF, but FBC as well, I know, has received some monies from the GCF. And I don't know if FBC, if you're online and if you have that information, if you can share that with us just very briefly. Sorry to put you on the spot, but when I saw FBC and GCF, I immediately remembered that FBC is doing something. So it's just a demonstration that even here in Zimbabwe, you can access some of these this global financing for issues of climate change. And I don't remember the name of the person from FBC. No? Maybe they're not on the line, but if they join later, maybe we can ask them to say a little bit about what they are doing and how they were able to access those funds. All right, so in terms of the interaction, climate change was spoken about, exacerbates poverty, affects food production and productivity in agriculture. Renewable energy, of course, it's all part of the response. Green growth, so more and more there's this focus, there's this talk about how do we grow our economy sustainably, how do we ensure that economic growth is green. How do we ensure that our GDP is green? And even at the national level, I've heard this talk in government as well. If we look at our current National Development Plan, which is the National Development Strategy, it talks about green growth, how the economy can grow sustainably. Impact of climate change on the poor, investment in environmentally sound technology. There's an indicator within goal number 17 that talks about investment in green technology. Impact on water availability, of course, with droughts, water becomes a problem. Skills, yeah, so more and more we're seeing, training, we're seeing even degrees around, sustainable practices, around sustainable development, climate change and mitigation. So these are the skills for the future, I would say, along with the digital skills, along with tech skills. More and more these skills are becoming important. And even some of those large global brands and businesses that we're talking about are setting up whole sustainability departments, and people are needed who have these skills to be able to guide businesses as they navigate this space. The gendered impacts of climate change and of disaster, impact of disasters on cities, we've spoken about, and again, 14 and 15, we've spoken a lot about carbon neutral industrialization, greening your processes, efficient resource use, which we've spoken about, and WASH and infrastructure and health. All right. So in terms of the possible business actions, we've spoken about climate proofing, but also providing the supplies, sandbags, more and more, floods are becoming an issue, irrigation systems and droughts, there are all sorts of business opportunities in terms of responding to the impacts of climate change. The rest we've discussed, the policies, the strategies, disaster risk reduction, but also just complying. And I know people complain about the Environmental Management Authority, the EMA, that some of the requirements are too stringent and difficult to comply with. But that's one way that you can play your role, play your part with regard to goal number 13. Awareness, and again, like most other goals, it's awareness for staff, for communities, and for your other stakeholders as well. Helping with early warning systems in your local area. But even developing products and services around early warning. I mean, we've seen people set up all sorts of apps and technologies that help with that early warning messaging. Okay, this is LinkedIn. So they've gone the route of electric vehicles for their staff. I'll play this one.
Since 2012, we know that we have avoided over 3,000 tons of carbon emissions because our employees are driving to work in electric vehicles and charging. I'm Peggy Brannigan, and I lead environmental sustainability globally for LinkedIn. LinkedIn's vision is to connect every member of the global workforce with economic opportunity. A lot of our employees are in the demographic that has explicitly said in many surveys recently that they care a lot to be working at a company that is sustainable and that they can express that passion for the environment.
My name is Danielle Glazier, and I'm the head of Bay Area Transportation for LinkedIn. I think EV charging on campus is a must for any employer. They're coming to work and they're doing a great job, but if you can support them in other things that they're really interested in, that's going to keep them there. It's also just a really great way to put your money where your mouth is when you say that you're here for sustainability and you want to have a sustainable business.
Having ChargePoint at LinkedIn really supports the goals that we're trying to achieve in terms of engagement.
Okay, so I think that's maybe enough to send the message across. And I mean, while this may sound and seem like something big and difficult to achieve, it really isn't. This is already in this country, we have hybrid vehicles, we have electric vehicles as well, not very many, but we have quite a number of hybrid ones. At UNDP, part of our fleet as well as hybrid. And then now they're talking about, as they replace our vehicles, starting to think about electric vehicles as well. That's something that is very doable, and that's a contribution that you can make in terms of reducing carbon emissions. All right, any questions before we go on to goal number 14?
Yes, Ethel, I have a question. So I think there's been a lot of debate around this whole thing of greening the economy. My question is, are we really in a position to green our economy as developing nations or as LDCs? is it really profitable for us, given that we haven't really gone through that industrialization period that maybe first world countries have gone through, for them to actually say now we're in a position to green our economy? Whereas on our end, we haven't really gone through that period. Is it going to be profitable for LDCs or for developing countries, maybe such as Zimbabwe, to maybe achieve SDG 13, greening the economy at the same time, profiting or having economic development at the same time?
Yes, I mean, as you say, there's been a huge debate about this, about, are they wanting to slow down our growth and this sort of thing. I think, I mean, if I can answer that question from an SDG perspective, what has been good about the SDGs or different between the MDGs and the SDGs is that there is room within the SDGs to tailor your responses to your own context. And I really believe that, I'm a firm believer in doing what works, particularly in your context. So there are benefits from greening. If we look at, as we've been going through, we've been looking at the cost savings side of things. And I think it's about really identifying what it is that works in our context and what it is that doesn't. So sort of at the big industrial level, it may be more difficult to achieve at this stage if we're talking about really wanting to grow our economy. But there is no harm and there is room in adopting green technology. So it's not necessarily, green technology, which in the long run is cheaper. You know what I mean? So there are elements of it that can work, but I mean, at that sort of macro level, I do understand what you're saying in terms of that. I don't know, what's right and what's wrong with. I can say this is the right way and this is the wrong way, but there are elements of that green growth that we can factor into our growth, that we can factor into our planning, that ultimately as well have cost savings. So really, I think my response to that would be about, doing what works. But I'd be interested in hearing thoughts from others on this specific one. So someone here says, we need to invest definitely in more research and development so that the innovation drives the greening process. And I speak a lot about youth because I've worked with youth, and I'm really very energized when I work with young people, because there's a lot that is coming out of them in terms of innovation, in terms of even just using these digital tools and digital technology. And there are a lot of these sort of new products and new ideas that are coming out of our young people. So even as we do this research and development that is being suggested here, bringing in the young people, they have a lot of ideas. But yeah, in terms of the original question, I don't want to comment too much. I know it's a debate that is raging globally, and it can become quite controversial at times, but there are elements that I think we can adopt and they can work in our context for us. And yes, definitely it's a long-term initiative. Yeah. And like Itai is saying, definitely it's a long-term initiative. It's not something that can happen overnight, definitely not. Because, and unfortunately with this whole idea of greening, while there are benefits eventually, the initial cost, the initial outlay tends to be quite heavy. So yeah, it's not something that can be done overnight. But thanks for that. I don't know if there are any others who have thoughts about this. Okay. All right. So we move on to goal number 14 now. So this one has to do with the life below water. And sorry, and I think I just used SDG. So you can just ignore the bottom part. Apologies for that. I think I've got SDG 8 across all of them from here. But it's about life below water. How do we manage, preserve, and conserve our water bodies, the biodiversity within our water bodies? And sometimes landlocked countries don't pay enough attention to SDG 14 because they're thinking, oh well, we are landlocked, it's mainly to do with oceans and seas, but we do have water bodies that we do need to look after, and we do have issues around our water bodies. All right, so there's a question about how prepared we are. Maybe if you can remind me after goal 14, we can come back to your question about financing these projects. All right. So regulation of fishing, I spoke about the biodiversity that's in our water bodies. We have a lot of small-scale fishers, but then we also have these large commercial fish companies as well. So those issues are addressed under goal number 14. But then also when we talk about small-scale fishers, it's also about their rights to access to these water bodies. Because sometimes licenses mean that the smaller scale fisheries aren't able to access, it means that their access is limited, then of course that has an impact on their livelihoods, on incomes, on poverty and that sort of thing. So sometimes the way we do our licensing, sometimes the regulations around that do prejudice the smaller players. It also looks at conservation and protection of marine areas. Yesterday I was talking about Lake Chivero, but also we have Kariba, which is very important to us in terms of even power generation, tourism, and a number of things, livelihoods as well. It looks as well at contamination and pollution of oceans, but similarly, we can look at our own water bodies. A number of them are contaminated, they're polluted. They're being used for all sorts of things, mainly because of, just as a symptom of the economic situation. Research as well in the field of marine technology, and then fishing as a proportion of GDP, so the contribution of fishing to the economy. So water, we've spoken about this, key requirement for business, tourism, aesthetic purposes, but also the economic opportunities, fishing, water sport, transport, all sorts of things. Waterfront properties are prime for construction as well. All sorts of opportunities coming out of water. And then in some countries, they even have special economic zones around sort of water bodies and marine assets. In terms of the interaction, small-scale farming has been quite significant. When we think about the Kariba area, we think about the Binga area, areas like that, small-scale fishing and fish farming has been quite significant. Fishing for food security, commercial fishing, we have people like Lake Harvest and others who are who run commercial entities based on fishing and water bodies. Addressing income inequality through fishing, marine-based, so FDI as well. So when we think about Kariba, we think Binga is quite ripe for investment. I think I used to go there a lot under one of our rural projects, and it really is an area that is underused and underutilized. There's a lot that can come out of Binga just with the right investment, and if that asset is really exploited and used for commercial purposes. But of course, there's the other side that says maybe we want to keep it natural, and what would commercialization mean for the locals? And of course, that has to be done in a sustainable way. It has to be done in a responsible way. Protecting our water bodies, skills, again, in this regard are important. Protecting our biodiversity, issues of, overfishing, so while, yes, we do want to ensure that even the smaller players can benefit from the economic opportunity that is in our water-based biodiversity, but there is also then the need to protect, there's a need to conserve for the future. So it needs to be done sustainably. Research and development, someone was suggesting, but even when it comes to our water bodies and marine technology as well, efficient use of water, hydro generation, hydropower, Kariba for us, health, the relationship with health, and of course, protecting water bodies in public spaces as well. In terms of business action, dumping, we've spoken a lot about cleaning up. Yeah, not only, refraining from dumping waste, but also working to clean up. There was a time when, I don't know what Lake Chivero is looking like at the moment in terms of that water hyacinth, that is always such a big problem. I've seen it in a number of our water bodies, and there's some who come to lend their help in terms of cleaning up these water bodies as well, investing and protecting those water systems and those ecosystems, and just awareness as well to your staff and stakeholders. Then also overfishing, I've spoken about participation in those special economic zones. There's a business case there as well, and investing in those businesses. I was giving the example of Binga, not just on the fishing side, but even on the tourism side as well. There's a lot that can be done in terms of tourism in that part of the country. Technology, again, an investment, and then as well, I guess, advocating for, for fairness, whether it's licensing and other provisions for the smaller scale farmers and helping to grow our SMEs in that way. And of course, also including the small scale farmers and fishers, in your supply chains, helping them as well access credit. Yeah. Sorry, I just need to make a note of this here. Okay. So this is what Coca-Cola is doing around water-based issues.
fact, in Honduras, we have an island of plastic coming from the watershed from Guatemala, from Honduras. All the waste is going to the watersheds, eventually come to the ocean. There's a big concern for us. It's impacting life, the oceans.
While we often see pictures of plastic waste in the oceans, that's not where the problem started. This is waste that was generated in cities, towns, and villages upstream and flowed through our waterways into our oceans. When you woke up this morning, you may have spent about an hour getting ready. In that hour, about 1,000 metric tons of plastic waste entered our oceans.
The Mesoamerican Reef in Central America is the largest transboundary reef system in the world and is the world's second longest barrier reef.
The Mesoamerican Reef is shared by 4 countries, which are Mexico, Belize, Guatemala, and Honduras. And it's a biodiversity hotspot, which hosts a number of marine sea life, such as whale sharks and over 500 species of fish, endangered marine turtles, and a whole ecosystem there.
Water is essential for life, health, and the communities where we operate. As the first ingredient in most of our beverages, it's also essential to the life and the health of our business.
WWF and the partnership with the Coca-Cola Company in Central America is to improve the watershed management in 3 countries, in Honduras, Guatemala, and Belize, to develop watershed management plans, working with the local bottle companies to change the vision, the importance of the water for the communities, to have access to drink, potable, safe water.
Since January, we're very excited because the Coca-Cola Company launched the new commitment on World Without Waste, and that can allow us in Central America to work with the different communities on how to recycle and how to dispose the waste the way it's supposed to be.
We aim to collect a bottle or a can for everyone we put in the marketplace by 2030, so that we reduce our impact on the waterways and the communities where we operate. We believe businesses and individuals can help solve the world's waste problem. Throughout your day, you make many choices. One choice that you can make, where you can take real action to protect the environment, is through collecting and recycling your own beverage packaging. We invite you to join us on this journey.
Okay, so they for every bottle or can that they put onto the shelves, onto the market, they want to make sure that they recycle 1 for 1. All right. So this is goal 15 now, but before I start, any questions on 14?
No.
Okay.
Yes,
All right, so
Ethel, I can see Aaron Maumbe in the chat box. He's asking about how prepared are we as a country to finance these projects?
okay, so yeah, so we spoke a little bit about, thanks Lois, we spoke a little bit about this yesterday in terms of, you know, our context being a bit difficult sometimes, you know, to attract some of this funding just because of the country perception and that sort of thing. But also when I gave the example of FBC, it is actually possible. I think more and more, if you can demonstrate whatever it is that the investors are looking for. So it's being able to respond to what investors are looking for. And like I was saying, more and more they're looking at sustainability, they're looking at SDGs. But if you're talking about national level projects, I think there's also room for public-private partnerships around some of these things and around some of these initiatives. Like I was saying, there's a lot that is available in terms of just greening, climate change, mitigation, adaptation, in terms of greening, in terms of renewable energy, there is a lot that is out there. But of course, then we have to then present that next to this case that someone raised just now in terms of, but is this good for our economies? Can we grow as fast if we focus too much on green? But where we have seen where there are a lot of funds at the moment is in those spaces. It is a whole global agenda. It's very topical at the moment. And I think even investors in themselves want to be seen to be investing in solutions towards this. We've seen even small startups, a lot of our youth as well, they've been able to access funds in some of these, whether it's innovation challenges, whether it's calls for proposals. We've seen people making submissions and bringing that money in. And when I spoke about GCF and GEF, that's money that comes in at the national level, so through government. But government, of course, in the implementation has to work with others. So whether it's the private sector, as in the case of FBC, or it's a development organization, as in the case of UNDP, we are seeing these monies coming in. So they are starting to come in, but I think there's more to be done. I was talking about, the interaction between skills and this whole green agenda. The more we are skilled, the more we have the capacity to be able to articulate what we want to do, and then to be able to do it once the money comes in. I think we can see more and more of it coming in. I don't know whether that answers your question. But maybe I can carry on and we can pick up on the conversation later if we need to. So under goal 15 is the sustainable use of, so 14 was looking at life underwater, now 15 is looking at life above the water, life on land. So this our forests, when we think about our wetlands, I was talking just now about construction on wetlands. When we look about deserts, even mountains, issues of forestation, reforestation, deforestation, environmental management and land degradation, protecting the biodiversity, issues of wildlife and poaching as well, would then go number 15, and then sharing the benefits from those resources. This one is a key one, particularly for the tourism sector, natural resource-based assets. We use a lot of those for mining, not for mining, sorry, for tourism. And again, there is still a business opportunity. It was quite interesting to read that article recently about, where they were wanting to put up the Formula One, what do they call it, track in Victoria Falls, and the tourism sector and even other local communities pushed back and they said, no, we don't want it. So again, it's, what comes first? What do we need to prioritize? So it's drawing the balance between all of those sort of economic opportunities, but also how we do it sustainably while also maintaining this life on land, while conserving it as well. Yeah, it's also an opportunity. I mean, as you work with communities around, natural resources and managing them, conservation, that sort of thing, it's an opportunity to build those relations with local communities. I mean, as a business or as a corporate citizen, it does make sense to have a good relationship with the people who are in the area where you operate from. Will the financing be opened to all? So each call is different. And again, I don't know, is FBC online? Okay, maybe not. So different. It
seems they're not in.
So different calls, I mean, are different. So at UNDP, for instance, if I can give another example, we have a fund that's coming up, or maybe I'm going to talk about it later, actually, and maybe I can answer your question at the time in terms of who is eligible and how it's done. The interaction, this one, I think I will just I won't speak to it much because this is all stuff that we've mainly seen. Poaching under goal number 16 as well, crimes against wildlife. Yep, a lot of it you've seen already, and I hope even as I'm clicking, you're already starting to already preempt and already imagine and know what's coming up because you've heard it so much since yesterday. Excuse me. Okay, possible business action, sustainable use, particularly those who use raw materials that are forest-based, refraining from over-harvesting, but also replanting. If you're harvesting timber, for instance, having sort of these reforestation initiatives and replanting. You can adopt a forest, you can adopt a wetland, you can adopt a mountain and be responsible for looking after it, for its protection, working, of course, preferably in collaboration with others in the community, working, of course, with local communities and those who live there. And then, yes, we're seeing buildings coming up on wetlands. Please don't do that. And responsible sourcing of raw materials, but also the policy side of things. Land degradation, so reclaiming land, particularly those who are in mining and who are working in businesses that, you know, where they need to dig into land, to chop down trees, where land degradation is a result of your work, working to reclaim some of those land, but also just complying with EMA. Sustainable growth of your operations, watching your footprint, so whether it's carbon or, you know, any other footprint that you have that may be harmful, just watching how you do that and how you can reduce any negative impacts. Anti-poaching, those particularly who are operating from areas that are around national parks, working together with the national parks in anti-poaching, and then sharing benefits. So I remember there was a big hoo-ha at some point about, you know, mining companies coming in, making a lot of money in these communities, but not giving anything back. And so we've seen a lot more in terms of giving back to the community, in terms of including and involving the communities in your work. And it can be urban communities as well. It doesn't have to be, it's not just the rural or those who are out there. And then, of course, biodiversity protection. Maybe I'll skip this one, but really it's Tata Steel because they have to dig into the land. So they're doing a lot in terms of reclaiming land that they have damaged as a result of their operations. Okay, goal number 16, because it's going to be a quick one, 16 and 17. So I'll go through those two and then I'll take questions at the end. So this one is about peace, it's about justice, and it's about inclusivity and strong institutions as well. So issues of violence, issues of conflicts and related deaths in their indicators and targets within goal number 16. Equal access to justice. It's not everybody who can access justice services when they need to. Here at UNDP, actually, we have a project around access to justice and helping people access it. Issues of corruption and crime, we've spoken about quite a bit over the past yesterday and last week, and this includes human trafficking as well. We're seeing more and more on this. I don't know how many of you heard the story. Was it Kuwait? I'm trying to remember which country it was, where a whole lot of ladies were taken from Zimbabwe under the guise of employment. And it's happening, that's not the only incident. I mean, it's happening a lot more now. You know, you're promised employment, you're promised all these good things, and they take you, you get there, and you find that's not actually what was happening, and that you've been a victim of human trafficking. I was talking about IDs yesterday and birth certificates and not being able to access education. So under goal number 16 is where they talk about legal identity. So whether people have IDs, birth certificates, any form of legal identity, access to information as well, protection of the freedoms of people, non-discriminatory laws and policies, including at the national decision-making level. And if Tsitsi's here, there's a big role for the legal fraternity here, and then also illicit financial flows and illegal arms. So, I mean, the importance of this goal for business is really, it really stems from the impact of all the issues that are covered under this goal on your business. So the impact of crime, for instance, the impact of violence and conflict on your business, the impact of corruption, the impact of, if you can't access justice as a business, weak governance and weak governance institutions, all of that has an impact and a bearing on your business. This I'll fly through again. Corruption, yes, it does perpetuate inequality. FDI under goal number 17 as well. Corruption in our local authorities, we are seeing it, and we are seeing how it's affecting the service provision as well. Corruption is quite a big one. Yep. And then the burden of conflict and violence on the health sector as well. I mean, if you can imagine living in a war zone and the strain and the stress on the health sector as people are coming in, they're injured, their mental health issues as well, all sorts happening there. As a business, in terms of reducing deaths due to that list of that I've put there, again, awareness campaigns coming towards Christmas. Now I know a number of businesses have awareness campaigns. They have things that they do in terms of just conscientizing people and reminding people to act responsibly and to behave responsibly. We spoke about sexual abuse and zero tolerance already. And the requirement for safe driving, I mean, some of you have fleets of vehicles in your companies. You can install trackers, you can monitor speed, just ensuring that you're doing what you can within your business. Rule of law, justice, information, working with government. I mean, this one, a lot of this in terms of the responsibility sits with government, but there is room for advocacy. There is room to work with government around pushing for some of these things to happen. Corruption, we hear that, there's zero tolerance at the moment. We hear that action is going to be taken, against corruption in government. Whether it's happening the way it should be happening or not, I don't want to comment on that. And I would like us to not get into a debate about that. But there we go, issues of corruption under goal number 16, rule of law. I mean, the rule of law here in Zimbabwe, it's just breaking down. Anyone and everyone believes they can do whatever they want. If we just look at the most basic level at our roads and the way people are just driving on the roads, it really is disaster out there. People doing what they want, but also advocacy around that, advocating, for sanity in this regard. Illicit financial flows, regularizing your financial transactions. And I know there's a lot that is happening in this space in terms of financial transactions, people using all sorts of tools and methodologies, or doing all sorts of things to get, whether it's to get away from paying tax, whether it's to hide some income. There's a lot that is happening here at the individual level, at the business level, but just regularizing that in terms of playing your role around target 16.4. And of course, some businesses have firearms, some businesses have other arms, I don't know, for different reasons, but these do need to be licensed. And of course, in terms of firearms, a lot more people are now purchasing those just because of the increase in crime, armed robberies, and this sort of thing. But they do need to be licensed, and it does need to be done in a proper way. I'm not saying, oh, go out and buy firearms. No. I'm just commenting. Please don't quote me. Corruption, I guess, advocacy. We're seeing a lot of this happening already. Good corporate governance within your own business. As well, apologies for the typo there, legal identity, birth registration. There's a business opportunity in producing the materials, whether it's the paper. We heard some time ago, a few months ago, the passport office wasn't issuing passports because they'd run out of the paper. I don't know where they're sourcing it from, where they're getting it from, and I don't know whether that's a business opportunity for a local business, but even the IDs, the materials that are used to provide those, I don't know whether we ever think about where they come from and whether a business could help be part of the solution. Prevention of violence and terrorism. Sometimes we think in Zimbabwe, oh, our country is safe, this doesn't touch us, there's no role for us here. But particularly the financial institution, just being careful, whether it's in your loans and the work that you do in transactions, moving money, whose money are you moving? Where has that money come from? So just that due diligence and looking to see that you are not facilitating some of this activity. So case studies, I'm going to send you actually as a link for goal number 16. Okay, and then number 17, partnerships around the goals. So under goal number 17 is really about partnerships, how do we come together at the local level, at the regional level, globally, around making these goals a reality. But it also looks at issues of investment and investment promotion. It looks at collaboration, as we're talking about partnering as well around technology, around research, around innovation, so that as planet Earth, we're all moving together and all able to benefit from these advances that are being made in technology, for instance. Partnerships across all sectors, tariffs we've spoken about, but it also appears here in goal number 17. Foreign direct investment, overseas development assistance, remittances. So when we think about monies that are coming, different types of monies and funds that are coming into a country, that's under goal number 17. Broadband, funny enough, is under goal 17, and subscriptions, the use of the internet, but also taxation, domestic resource mobilization, and whether you're paying your taxes or hiding your income. Why does it matter? The more can be achieved, through partnership. There's that saying about if you want to go further, go together, faster, go alone. Multi-country partnerships, the AFCFTA is an opportunity, it's a current opportunity. that we're only really starting to try and understand and try and set ourselves up to be able to benefit from it. Taxes, they're important for business in terms of, money that's coming out of your business, but also in terms of the fiscus, and playing your role. FDI in your own places and spaces, looking out there to see, to scout around for investors and to try and attract them, whether it's to your business, but even nationally at the national level. When we think about ZEDA and the Ministry of Industry and others who are working in that space. Broadband and internet availability, business opportunity, but it's also important for the functioning of your business. I can't imagine that a business can operate efficiently without access to the internet. Tariffs we've spoken about, and then of course also export opportunities. So for this one, I haven't gone goal by goal, but it really is around partnership for the goals. And so now, okay, before that, let me look at business action. So paying your taxes, I mean, and I understand there's a lot that is happening, a lot of shenanigans around taxes and what people are paying ZIMRA or not paying ZIMRA. But also when we're talking about funding, there are SDG bonds now that are available as a tool for mobilizing resources. I'll talk a bit more about them in the next few slides. FDI collaborating with sourcing external investors, mobilizing FDI, money transfer services that's coming up again in goal number 17. And the financial sector could also help, government in terms of developing debt servicing instruments to service some of that debt. Technology, so provision of affordable internet. Yes, it's available, but is it affordable? But we also have quite a bit of a digital divide. It's not everybody within the country who can access the internet and who can access it affordably in a way that is affordable. I don't know if that's a word, but anyway, investing in science and technology as well, in innovation, even mentoring and helping some of these young people who are coming up with a number of innovations in this space. Export activities, advocating for fair tariffs, we've spoken about, the policy discussion. And then on that last one, there are indicators under goal number 17 to do with just the availability of data, statistics that will then enable governments, enable organizations like ours to be able to track progress in terms of development, to be able to see where the gaps are. And so when Zimstat and others come around and they come with a questionnaire and they ask you to provide them with information, and I know a lot of times the easier thing is just to say, oh, no, we don't have the time, but that information does help. The more information that is available, the more informed the solutions and the interventions can be. This is just a very quick one. This is just on goal 17 and partnership around the SDGs. So this is a coalition of 17 global corporates who are worth more than a combined 500 billion, who've partnered together to see what they can do around the SDGs. So they are working to advocate for SDGs. They're working to raise awareness, but even within their own companies, they're working to mainstream the SDGs and align their operations with the goals. So this is a very quick one, less than a minute, I think. Yeah. Okay, and just while I think about it, this is so random, sorry, but just while I think about it, in terms of sustainability reporting, because sometimes we get questions about sustainability reporting, SDG reporting, we have some very good local examples. So if you look, for instance, at Tongat Hewlett, the sugar people, they produce a very, very detailed sustainability report and a very detailed SDG report as well. Econet, if you look at their annual reports as well, they are doing a very good job of tracking and tracing and reporting on what they are doing in SCORE as well. And I guess for them, it's because, of the listing requirements, but just in terms of good examples of sustainability reports, for those of you who want to think about that and think about how you can start to monitor the progress in what you are doing, those are three good examples that I can think of. All right. So this you can watch in your own time. And then in closing, let me look at this question quickly. Internet, to make sure it is running without glitches. This question I don't think is for me. I'm not sure I can answer it about internet and about internet glitches. Emma enforcing. Yeah, so Emma, I mean, I've heard a lot of complaints around Emma, you know, and how they enforce, and sometimes it's more of an obstacle. It doesn't really facilitate progress in this area, but I think there's room as well to engage around this. And in terms of the mining sector specifically, and how Emma is doing that, I don't have insight to that. But with Emma, definitely there are issues, and I've heard these issues being raised a lot. My suggestion would be maybe to get in touch with the Business Council for Sustainable Development, because I know they do a lot of work in this area. We've also done a bit of work with them as well around the SDGs for their members, but they do a lot of work in this area. They have somewhat of a relationship with Emma, and I think if that conversation can be taken up with them, you may be able to get an answer to this and help if you need it. I don't know, excuse me, Aaron, which sector you're working in. But yeah, the Business Council for Sustainable Development, definitely. The one on the internet, I'm not sure I understand it in terms of, is it glitches? Maybe which glitches specifically you're referring to? And maybe while you're putting that in the chat, I can continue and close. So in closing, so when we're looking about thinking about mainstreaming and alignment within your business, within your organization, it has to be driven from the most senior level. For most businesses, it will be something new. And so just getting colleagues to cooperate, getting colleagues to understand may be difficult, but if it's driven from the most senior level, but also making sure that staff understand what the SDGs are about, understand what sustainability is about, understand why it's important for their business, it's then easier to bring everybody along as you're taking this journey. It should be done across the board. I've mentioned this before, all the way from your strategy right down to business development. So across, whether it's in management, whether it's in your governance structures, in all your operations and departments, HR, finance, logistics, transport, everything, product development, in your innovation, in your research and development, every part of your business, the SDGs are relevant and are important. But also, like I've said, ensuring staff are on board. And then just to say as well that there is no requirement. So a lot of businesses put themselves under pressure to try and sort of report on all the goals or to demonstrate what they are doing. There's no pressure to mainstream all the goals. There's no one size fits all. You select those that are most relevant in your context, those that are most relevant and most doable for your business. So it may be that you just choose one goal for now. And it may be that you just choose one target or two targets within one goal for now. And then next year you add another 3. Maybe the other year you add another 5. Maybe a few months down the line you feel like we can add 3 more. So it can be and should be incremental. So just bite off what you can chew, mainstream that, and then take on more, you know, as appropriate and as is relevant in your context. The case for SDGs and ESG. So I mean, I've spoken about this, so I'll try not to repeat what I've said already. So there are those. ESG is environmental, social, and governance provisions and what can I call them, issues within your business. And so those are a good starting point, because when we think about, remember I spoke about how sustainability reporting is mandatory now on the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange. So a lot of people report from an ESG perspective. So just looking at the environmental, at the social, and at the governance. Sorry, there's just a knock at the door. Let me just attend to that. Sorry, just 1 minute. Okay, sorry about that. And so, yeah, but so SDGs are more comprehensive. So even as you sorry, another disturbance. Apologies, colleagues. Okay, apologies. Yes, but SDGs are more comprehensive. So ESG covers some of the issues, but not all of the issues. But there's been this global call for the standardization of this ESG reporting, but it's a double-edged sword because we can't expect, if we're going to standardize globally, we can't expect an SME in Zimbabwe or an SME in most parts of the world to be able to do the same level of reporting or to be held to the same standard as, let's say, Apple or Google globally. So, I mean, there is benefit really in just doing what is possible where you are with what you have. And so it's been working so far. There's no sort of standard way of doing it, which is why if you take the time to look at those three that I mentioned, you'll see that they're reporting in different ways, but they are still reporting in a way that makes sense for them. So the World Economic Foundation suggested that maybe, so they got together with the big four, PricewaterhouseCoopers, Deloitte, and other World Economic Forum, in an effort to start to standardize. So they came up with 21 indicators or metrics, core ones, and then 34 that are a bit broader. Yes, you can use those if you would like to, but my recommendation would be just still to do what works for you, especially for the smaller enterprises. Sometimes there's this burden and it feels like it's too much. And then the easiest thing to do in that case is just to not do it. And you feel like, this is too much for our business. But ultimately, SDG mainstreaming or alignment should be more than just, it shouldn't be a tick box exercise, actually. Think about it in terms of the benefits for your business. And even when you are tracking, if you start, and I always recommend this to businesses. Yes, there's the greater good, which is what we're wanting to do, sustainability, all of that. But usually for a business, the clearest lens is the one that says, what does it mean for our bottom line? How do we make money? How do we cut costs? So it's the money lens. Even if you want to look at it from that sort of lens, what is the benefit to our business? And you start tracking in that way. It's a win-win situation. So you're doing good while at the same time you're earning more revenue or you're cutting costs, you're getting benefit from it. It demonstrates what you're doing beyond CSR. It's not necessarily extra work. So a lot of this you are already doing, but it's more about being more deliberate in terms of, identifying what it is, acknowledging what it is that you're doing and starting to monitor. And of course, there are positive reputational issues as well. Right, so in the last few minutes, I'm going to go through some UNDP resources and support. But before I go on to that, okay, freight forwarding and customs clearing, interaction and submissions to ZIMRA. Yes. So on this one, actually, I'm going to comment. Let me just take a note of this. I'm actually going to comment on the ZIMRA one just now. And bonds. Sorry, I'm just writing this down so I don't forget. Okay, so in terms of resources at UNDP, so we have something that we call the SDG impact standards. In the same way that we have the Standards Association of Zimbabwe and other standards bodies globally and standards, the SDG impact standards is to help businesses get clear sight of what they're doing around the SDGs and setting up some standards around that. In their current form, sort of the generic form is quite complex and involving, but there is room to then tailor them to your context and to your situation. And we can help you with that. We can work with you on that one. Green bonds, SDG bonds, sustainability-based bonds, more and more we are seeing a demand at the national level, but even some business issuing these bonds and UNDP. We have a regional hub, a sustainable finance hub that can provide help and assistance in terms of issuing these bonds. And I know our context and our economy is maybe not the best for instruments like this, but it is something that is available for those who feel like they would like that sort of information and that sort of help. Impact measurement and management, just managing and measuring your impact, the impact that you're making in terms of sustainability and the SDGs. There are some tools that we have around that. There's something that we call SDG investor maps. This is a huge undertaking. It happens at the national level, working with government. And the idea is that there is a lot in terms of needs, SDG needs, right? And then on one side, and then on the other side, there is a lot of money, and they have investors who don't know where to put their money. Investors who maybe want to invest in SDG related initiatives, but they don't know where they are. They don't have the information. They don't have enough data about the market. And so what SDG investor maps do is bring the two together. So as I say, it's a huge undertaking. There's analytical work that happens, the collection of data within a country, at a country level, working with the government, with the private sector, with UNDP as well, in terms of bringing that information together, mapping what the investment opportunities are, where they are, bringing together all of that information that an investor would want or would need in order to be able to make that investment decision, and making it available as a public good online for businesses. So there are a number of countries that have already done this. And again, the difficulty for us, again, in our context as well, is that investment for us at the moment is something that is not very easy to attract into this country. But I mean, this does still exist as a UNDP tool. If you Google SDG investor maps, that will come up. But I'll also send links to all these resources as well, together with the presentation. And then, of course, helping you to mainstream the SDGs into your business, to align your actions with the SDGs, that technical support we can provide. So on these next slides, I've just put a bit more about those bullets. So in terms of the SDG, of the impact standards, so there are different standards for enterprises, for private equity funds, for bond issuers as well. So in terms of impact measurement and management, a bit of information about that. And online training is available for this IMM, for those who would like to be trained on this. And peer support is also available, through Impact Champions and through interaction with others who are going through the same process. So a bit of more information as well about sustainable bonds. We also have blue bonds for those who have ocean-based, marine-based economies as well. And like I said, they can be issued at national level, at corporate level, and it's not for greenwashing. And so greenwashing is, or impact washing, is the process of sort of just putting some English words together or whatever language you're using, just to, to make it seem as though you are having impact, or as though you're greening your operations when you have not, or when you are not actually doing that. But it's about really drilling down and being accurate in terms of showing what you're doing around greening, what you're doing around impact and sustainability. SDG investor maps I've spoken about. So just translating really SDG needs and policy priorities into actionable investments. And this is available online. Carbon markets as well. Carbon is becoming more and more interesting, more and more topical as well. So our sustainable finance hub as well has some experts there who help and support countries in terms of developing carbon markets, but also working with companies who want to sort of focus on what they are doing in terms of carbon as a form of resource mobilization. Now you can sell your carbon credits. There's a whole market around that, and we can bring in our colleagues to help with that. So now I'd said I would answer the question later about who is eligible. So under something called the Joint SDG Fund, UNDP working together with UNESCO, with UN Women, with UNCDF and the government will be launching this fund. And the fund really is to increase the amount of financing that is available for renewable energy initiatives. So let me say affordable affordable financing that is available for that. So it's bringing private sector investments and applying it for renewable energy projects. So there'll be some seed funding, but the idea is that we can then also mobilize resources locally. We have some banks who are already ready to put some money towards this fund as well, just to lend to those who would like to set up renewable energy initiatives, but also targeting the rural women in particular and youth, rural communities for jobs and for entrepreneurship and for things like mini grids for power generation in the rural areas, but just so that rural communities can also earn an income from renewable energy. And so for this one, in terms of eligibility, UNDP is working with the fund manager, but the idea is to make it as inclusive as possible. Obviously, there will be some criteria around it in terms of, your business, in terms of what you're planning to do, in terms of the return on investment, whether you will be able to pay back the loans and that sort of thing. So that will be launched. The actual launch should be end of this month. And then in terms of it actually rolling out and money starting to be dispersed, that will probably happen in the early part of next year. Maybe before I go there, let me just look at the chat here. You have a model for a sustainability standard. Maybe we can talk about this afterwards. You can get in touch with me. Okay, no, that's and then that's just Polytech, research and development. Definitely all the sort of thing that we are interested in, we can discuss bilaterally as well. Right. Yeah, so just in conclusion, as a business, I think at the center of it all, what's probably the most important for you is the idea that the SDGs can impact your bottom line. In fact, I should have said they do, not just that they can, they do. So whether you're paying attention to the SDGs or not, already they are touching your businesses, whether it's through disaster, whether it's through employment, whether it's through climate change, whether it's through whatever it is, whatever's happening in the economy, the economic situation, SDGs are already having an impact on your business. So it makes sense to pay attention and to see what you can do in response. They can inspire innovation, new products, new innovations. It's not just about corporate social responsibility and the environment. They go much further than that, and they touch all parts of your business. And it's very important that you do what works for you and you contextualize them, you tailor them to your situation, and help is available as you start to take this journey. As UNDP, we are here, and we have others as well within the UN system who can come in at different times and in different spaces. This finally, I think, should be my last slide, and those are my contact details for those who would like to get in touch with me. So Global, I've just added this just for those who may want to do a bit of Googling, a bit of research. These are resources that are available that you can look up just to read up a bit more on this. But yeah. So this is the end, Lois. I'm going to hand back to you.
Thank you, Ethel. I don't know if there's anyone with a question before we close. Yeah, it seems we don't have. Okay, firstly, I'd like to thank UNDP for the partnership. Ethel, I thank you so much for taking time from your busy schedule to do these trainings. They are very important to the business organization. I also hope the friendship with UNDP will continue to grow as always. And